The Marlins are looking set in the corner outfield, or are they? What are they going to do with Avisail Garcia? Is Avisail Garcia's career with the Marlins going to end this offseason equally? Could Skip Schumaker's Marlins career end? The Padres are continuing their managerial search. Could Skip Schumaker be in the frame? We hope not, but we're going to talk about it today. This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. This, of course, is your daily Marlins podcast. I am your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Miami Marlins _UK. If you are listening to the pod, of course, hit subscribe. It's your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. Coming at you late. Got to call that out. But before we talk about that, there is a YouTube channel, of course. Make sure you head on over there and hit subscribe over on YouTube as well. This episode is sponsored by FanDuel. You can make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And welcome to Wednesday, the 25th of October's episode of Locked On Marlins. We are continuing our series, our conversation around stick or twist. We talked yesterday about third base and center field. We're going to now segue into the corner outfield spots. In many ways, it looks set to the naked eye. There's a big decision to make, though. Equally, do the Marlins need to consider adding in this area? I think it's an interesting discussion topic, so we're going to talk about that today in some detail. Of course, there has to be some Avisail Garcia conversation. He is a corner outfielder, of course. He is owed money, as we know. The question is, do the Marlins retain Avisail Garcia? Do they give him another shot? Do they let it get to spring? All of these questions we're going to talk through today. We also have to talk about Skip Schumaker. I mentioned on yesterday's episode with Skip Schumaker, he went on a blogathon seemingly on Twitter for whatever reason. I'm still safe, by the way, so that's encouraging. Normally, I'm one of the first to go down for whatever reason. When these blogathons occur, I'm normally one of the first to bite the dust. It's normally, I don't know, in order of priority. It could be Alex Ferrer, takes were made, and then Pete Pratt in some kind of order. It seems to be that. And the Fish Army, too. They always seem to catch a few strays. But the interesting topic, and discourse, I think maybe Glenn Geffner shared this on Twitter as well earlier on, maybe this morning. The fact that the Padres have a vacancy in their managerial ranks right now. There is a vacancy. Skip Schumaker obviously knows the Padres, was there with the Padres 2 seasons ago, if I recall correctly. And obviously his family is based in the West Coast. So naturally there's kind of putting two and two together. And are you getting 5 out of that? And obviously there's this turbulence around the Kim Ang exit situation, reporting around that obviously Skip and his staff pretty unhappy about that call. So the Padres seem to be going through their progression, let's say, around their managerial interviews. That seems to be taking place, kind of happening right now. I haven't heard anything to suggest that Skip Schumaker's met with the Padres, that the Marlins have allowed Skip to meet with the Padres. And frankly, from Bruce Sherman's perspective, why would he? Why would Bruce Sherman want to enable Skip Schumaker to have a conversation with the Padres? The reality is the Marlins have, right now, in my opinion, got a competitive edge for having Skip Schumaker with the Marlins. Why would you let him go to the Padres willingly? You wouldn't. The only reason you would do is if the relationship has become untenable and the relationship is broken down to that point where Skip Schumaker is allowed to go and seek other opportunities. We'll keep a close eye on this one. I think it's probably unfair at this stage to kind of go off and start a huge amount of speculation in this area. But as the famous saying goes, there's no smoke without fire. I don't know if there is any actual smoke. The article that Glenn Geffner shared, didn't really report anything. It didn't commit to anything. It said, the Padres could ask the Marlins and Skip Schumaker could be interested because of the former connections and the fact that his family is based there. And he could be interested because he's potentially unhappy about Kim Ang. So basically, an article out there that doesn't really have any verified information from what I can read into it anyway. So, as a Marlins fan, I'm seeing the way Skip Schumaker managed the team last year, the way he led the guys. Clearly, I'm hoping that he doesn't entertain those offers. Like I said, the reason that he would entertain those offers and that Bruce Sherman would entertain those offers is if the relationship is broken down or there is someone coming in, president of baseball ops, and as part of that deal, the view is I'd like to bring my own actual manager into this as well. There's someone I have earmarked. We work well together, etc., etc. I don't know Skip Schumaker, etc., etc. That's another situation here. So it's one to keep an eye on, guys. My gut feel is that Skip Schumaker's going absolutely nowhere this year, and he will be the Marlins manager in 24. The timing of those blocks, interesting, no doubt. But you have to do what you have to do on Twitter sometimes, and sometimes that block button can be utilized. I haven't blocked anyone, by the way. I don't think I block anyone. Like, I'm open book. Other people like to operate differently and calm the noise, let's say. Let's talk about corner outfield, though. But before we do that, let's do our first ad of the day, guys. And it's time to let you know about our good friends over at Jase Medical. Yes, sir. So let's get those graphics pumped on the Jase Medical front. Boom. For those watching, you would have seen why I've just said boom. But anyway, guys, Jase Medical have been, we've been talking about them for a few weeks now, but there is a lot of uncertainty in the world today. Absolutely. And it's important to be prepared. There's unrest in the Middle East. There's fires in Hawaii, hurricanes and tornadoes in Florida, earthquakes and more. These can lead to supply chain shortages for medications or the inability to get medications in a timely manner. That's where the Jase case comes in. The Jase case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Sounds critical. Must have in many ways, I would say. So it sounds like the right time to be doing this. Probably is the right time. So if you think it is, get yourself over to jasemedical.com and enter the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. The promo code again is LOCKEDON, and the website is jasemedical.com. Jase, spelled Jase for jasemedical.com. Okay, guys, welcome back. You are here with me, Peter Pratt, on Wednesday, the 25th of October. We are talking corner outfield, baby. So let's start with the guys who were there every day, pretty much every day, particularly against right-handed pitching. And those guys were Brian De La Cruz, and the other guy was Jesus Sanchez. Both of them, heading into the season, let's start with Brian De La Cruz. Spent most of his time at left field and he's a below average guy in left field, I would say, defensively. He's like, okay, but, he's not amazing in left field. It's fine. Remember last year, the season before, 2022, boy, oh boy, Brian De La Cruz was like MVP caliber player in September. And so everyone went into 23 thinking, what kind of Brian De La Cruz are we going to get? Like, the hot streaks are really hot. Can we see more of that for longer? When are we going to see that? Can Brian De La Cruz effectively take the next level and the next stage of progression for him? Obviously, Brant Brown's come in, all of the different guys in and around the team, and thus they've been working differently before. I think when I look back on Brian De La Cruz's season and, looking at things now, let's just kind of quickly flick it over here. I thought that he had a better year than he did. I don't know if you guys think the same, but like when I reflect on what Brian De La Cruz did, which ended up being, he played in 153 games. It's one thing to call out. Ton of playing time for Brian De La Cruz. 626 plate appearances, 19 home runs. But when I look at it, I was like, wow, a WRC plus of 92 kind of surprised me. And with the defensive numbers where they are, not great. WRC plus of slightly below average in that sense. He hit 257, 19 home runs, a lot of plate appearances for that though. That equates to an F WAR anyway of 0.2. So it was positive, which is good. But I don't know about you guys, but I kind of come away from that feeling like a touch underwhelmed with Brian De La Cruz. I thought he had a better year than that. And I don't know why. I wonder what you guys think on that topic. But, when you look at like the ebbs and flows of his season, I think he started really well. March and April, the early part of the year, May in particular, when the Marlins went on that hot streak, and June, like it was really nice. You get to July and the All-Star break. And from then, July and August, which coincided with the Marlins kind of hitting that sticky spell, he was only hitting 215 through both of those calendar months. Picked it back up again in September and October. But really, it was a season of two halves. The first half almost hit 280 and then kind of dropped down to 228 in the second half. It wasn't the same Brian De La Cruz, I would say. One of the things that was called out was his approach in 3-2 counts or with two strikes. I think that was the other thing that kind of was like a narrative that was going through on the year. So what did he do in 3-2 counts? He hit 250, which actually is pretty good. So I think that was a sign of improvement there with Brian De La Cruz. But when you look at like down 0-2, 1-2, 2-2 as well, he's hitting under 235 in all of those counts. So when he fell behind in the main, he kind of struggled a touch. But he did kind of knuckle down in those 3-2 counts in particular. We did see signs of life. When he was in a kind of 2-0 count, for example, he's hitting nearly 400 in that situation. So, listen, Brian De La Cruz, the thing we have to call out on him is Brian De La Cruz is league minimum salary. So that's a tick. From a Marlins perspective, and, we're going to talk a lot about the way this roster is constructed, the way the costs are constructed as we progress through. But to call it out on Brian De La Cruz, cost-controlled guy. He's, showed signs at times of a very serviceable, if not good, outfield stick. The defense isn't great, as we know, but there's definitely a guy there, particularly at league minimum, that will, I think, get another sizable opportunity heading into 2024. I'd be surprised if the Marlins look to really twist on that one with Brian De La Cruz. I think he's well liked. A lot of people like him in the clubhouse as well. And I think, when you piece together Brian De La Cruz, you piece together Jazz Chisholm Jr., and you piece together Jesus Sanchez, those three, which were the kind of main three starters, for me, there's a potential across the three of those guys to collectively deliver. Let's assume the Jazz plays the majority of time. There's a cluster of three outfielders there that I think could combine for like 8 WAR if they do well, if they perform well. Like it's an 8 WAR outfield there potentially, maybe more. Depends what Jazz could do. And the total cost of that is in and around $5 million in total, let's say. Brian De La Cruz on minimum. We'll see what Jazz ends up in year one of ARB. And then equally Jesus Sanchez in year one of ARB as well. But, it ends up being about $5 million for like, 8 WAR if they all stay on the field and perform as they have done and actually maybe even take the next step too. So that's absolutely where the Marlins need to be. And these are the spots they need to be in, where you've got ultra cost controlled guys early in ARB or league minimum who have, taken the time to, progress and develop. And again, 2024 is going to be another developmental period for them. Let's talk about Jesus Sanchez now. And Jesus Sanchez, I would say, he did take a step forward. When I look back at last year, he was right on the bubble of being DFA'd. No minor league options existed for Jesus Sanchez. He had a rocky 2022. He definitely had some growing up to do. He slept in one day, like kind of famously kind of slept in and turned up late. There was just some poor professionalism with Jesus Sanchez. He looks like that kind of guy, doesn't he? Like, he looks like a fun guy. You could see how he could kind of be a bit lax, a bit relaxed about rules and et cetera, et cetera. And maybe Miggy Rowe pointed a few fingers at Jesus Sanchez last year. Potentially he did. I don't know. But, this year, what we saw from Jesus Sanchez was a progression. Definitely a progression, particularly using the opposite field. Jesus Sanchez, the strikeout historically in 2022, and prior to that, as kind of people found him out, it just was way too high. It was unsustainable for Jesus Sanchez, for certain. So, when you kind of reflect on his year and you look at his overall body of work, he ends up putting a WRC plus of 109. That's in 402 plate appearances. So 109 WRC plus, that'll play. That equates to a 1.3 WAR. That'll play. He's entering ARB for the first year, I think, this year. Although I've said that and now I'm slightly doubting myself, but I think he is ARB eligible. But I'm not 100% certain. He's either that or league minimum. The power is always there with Jesus Sanchez, but the opposite field stuff did, definitely show up, I would say. One of the other knocks with Jesus Sanchez, and I think I maybe knocked him in this area too, and I know like Loud Marlins fan definitely plowed into him in this topic, which kind of became pretty funny. But when you're on Fangraphs and you're looking at the leverage spot, like how does Jesus Sanchez perform in low, medium, or high leverage? One thing that stood out to me is at medium leverage, he's good. He's hitting 272 in medium leverage spots. Low leverage is 223. When you go to high leverage, albeit it's only 42 plate appearances, he's hitting 306. Pretty impressive. When you look at his what he actually delivers in certain counts, for me, this is really intriguing. Early in the count, he seems to come alive. That's where he's at his most effective in kind of, particularly if it's a 1-0 or 2-0 count. Like all of a sudden, he comes alive in those spots. 2-0 count, he's hitting over 300. 1-0 count, he's hitting 284. You go the opposite way and he's a strike, he's 1 or 2 strikes down. 0-2, for example, he's 175. And this is the next progression for Jesus Sanchez. I think when he uses his plate discipline, and I say that term loosely for Jesus Sanchez, but when he's able to work the count to a favorable count for him, he's a very dangerous hitter. So that's it for Jesus, is trying to get himself into a much better hitting count. And then he can do damage, and we've seen that. When he falls behind, he really struggles in those moments. And so, bit of plate discipline, bit more watchful, but equally, take a little bit of the Brian De La Cruz, the kind of 3-2 count of being able to, really start to think about doing different things. 3-2 count, he's hitting 216. Whereas, as I mentioned with Brian De La Cruz, in those same counts, Brian De La Cruz hitting 250, quite a sizable difference. And visibly, there's a sizable difference. Obviously, with Jesus Sanchez as well, what we have to call out, against lefties, it still remains a big struggle. Hitting 213 on the year, 259 against righties. It'll play. He's absolutely serviceable in right field. I think there's more in the tank. I think there's more to tap into for the Marlins with Jesus Sanchez. Considering the contract value, I certainly could see Jesus Sanchez taking the majority of starts against righties in right field. I could certainly see Brian De La Cruz starting most games in left field. I can see Jase Jr., as I talked about yesterday, starting in center field most days as well. The question then comes is, what do the Marlins do with Avisail Garcia? Equally, we need to think about Peyton Burdick as well, because Peyton Burdick is absolutely kind of appearing on a roster bubble situation here. Obviously, he had a brief stint in 2023. For me, looks overmatched. Like I'm not convinced that his profile is really what the Marlins were looking for. Again, who knows how things will play out? But I'd say Peyton Burdick is definitely. I think he may have one option here remaining. And if so, then I think that will be absolutely utilized at the start of 24. And the Marlins have kind of got a decision to make with him. Bit similar to Haydar and Encarnacion, I'd say, with Peyton Burdick. Like, I can sense they're just being a little sneaky kind of DFA at some point and clearing him off the 40-man. We'll wait to see. But for me, we didn't really see any kind of major progression with Burdick. His profile didn't really fit what the Marlins and Kim Ang was doing. Who knows what the future direction will be. Let's finish up talking about Avisail Garcia. Where else should we finish but Avisail Garcia? But before we do that, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. And October baseball is well and truly back, baby. And how about those Snakes? The Phils got Game 7. Boy, oh boy, the Phils, they went cold at the bank, baby. Red October has been snake bitten. And, well, listen, you can make your postseason debut with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Join FanDuel today. Get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to create your new account. Then you can get in on the action from the first pitch until the final out. Bet on everything from strikeouts to home runs to who will win the game. Also, who will win the World Series. Those Rangers and Diamondbacks. Unbelievable. If you don't want to wait the whole game to get the dub, predict what will happen in the next at-bat with quick bets. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. Step up to the plate this postseason with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, guys, final segment here with me, Peter Pratt, on Wednesday, the 25th of October. A late one. You're probably thinking, why is this so late coming out? I had a tennis match queued up at 9 p.m. UK time. As I'm recording this right now, it is now 11:30 p.m. UK time after a tennis match, a two-setter affair. I'm in League 4 in the league I play in. The standard's pretty good. I played against a guy who was ex-League 1, stopped playing for a while, and is now working his way back through up. Anyway, he absolutely spanked me. 6-love, 6-1. Was closer than it seems, but he wasn't trying. I was fully gassed. He had me running everywhere. I was absolutely gasolinated. This is the problem, right? When you're overmatched. You know, I put all the effort in, but I was overmatched. As much as I huffed and puffed, it wasn't enough. Why is that relevant to this episode? I think it's about talking about Avisail Garcia. Somehow, Avisail Garcia, I don't know if he plays tennis. You should do. You should play tennis. But let's talk about Avi. Because let me just put it out there right now. Jesus Sanchez, he absolutely shouldn't be facing lefties at all. The Marlins need a right-handed stick, a right-handed outfielder that has a prototypical outfield profile that can play against lefties. There's a need for that. As the year progressed, once Avi was down and other people were down, you ended up seeing like Garrett Hampson out there or John Birdie and stuff. Like, I get it. There was a need for that, but for balance, and they were trying to, and Soler was spending some time out there, but Soler, they were trying to protect him more and keep him in the DH role. Soler won't be there anyway. So I still see a pathway where there's a roster spot available for Avisail Garcia heading into spring. The question is, with the change of direction, like, I honestly think when this season was done, I think a decision was already made around Avisail Garcia. He was basically on the Phantom IL for the rest of the year. The Marlins had made that decision that his time in Miami was over. New front office coming in. Does that change? Does Avi get another life? The Marlins have a need for someone with Avisail Garcia's profile pre-Marlins. They need a right-handed stick that can do some damage against lefties. And if all that is what you can get out of Avi is a platoon guy on the short side of the platoon, then so be it. The other decision is, do you just straight up DFA him and you move on? The thing is with baseball, guys, I have to call this out. From one year to the next, for whatever reason, and often it's unknown, guys can just turn it on. And so at this point with Avi, and considering the Marlins still have a need for that type of guy, and from what I can see right now on the 40-man or wider, there's not really any alternatives. I'm now thinking Avisail Garcia gets another opportunity here into spring and see again how it goes. Again, you just don't know. You can bite the bullet now, pay the money and move on. But really, there's no true value in that for the Marlins. What happens if Avi rocks up the spring and comes alive? What happens if he refines his form? And the Marlins, and he ends up refining his form elsewhere. Imagine that. Next thing is the Marlins have had to spunk another, 12, 24 million, plus a buyout, I think, probably for the other year. Let's call that another 2 or 3. So the Marlins have got to give like Avi the $27 million handshake. I think he needs one more chance in spring. I don't want there to be another chance. He's been the free agent signing that I've had the most dislike for, as a Marlins fan. He really is. It's just been so infuriating with Avisail Garcia. Kimang was able to flex the Gene Segura situation, hasn't been able to flex the Avisail Garcia situation, which is even more expensive, as much as she's likely tried or did try. But I think there's still, because of the way the roster sits right now, with Soler going, and we'll wait to see what happens with Josh Bell. But with that, and the lack of options, and I think the lack of spending that's going to come, I think that Avisail Garcia will get another opportunity. And could you imagine how wild it would be if Avisail Garcia finds a way to turn it on and refine the form? It would be huge for the Fish if he could do that. And there's a role for Avi. There really is. There's at least a platoon role in right field. At least. And who knows what happens to Brian De La Cruz and everyone else. There's always going to be guys dinged up. So there's always going to be a need for a fourth outfielder. I talked yesterday, though. This is really interesting, though, because if that's the case and that's the decision, then where do the Marlins' heads go at with Jonathan Davis and Garrett Hampson, etc.? Does that impact it? But Garrett Hampson, he's obviously got the infield position versatility, which is important. But I think if the Marlins do think about that, then they probably have to consider non-tendering Jonathan Davis, to be honest with you. And I've spoken about Jonathan Davis a lot. A lot of people would be saying, like, Pete, you're overplaying this Jonathan Davis situation. And I get that. But I've seen what happens to Jazz most time. Like, the evidence tells me that Jazz will miss significant amounts of time. And with that, the Marlins really need to have that backup plan. They have to have Jonathan Davis on the roster to be the backup plan for Jazz. And they may well flex Jazz back to the infield. We spoke about it yesterday. I don't think they will. But I think because you've got Birdie and you've got Hampson, and then you've got Avi and Jonathan Davis, there's probably enough with those guys to be able to cover all outcomes. You're going to need like an emergency first baseman, but you can just throw a glove on anyone and stick them at first base, to be honest with you. But yeah, I'm thinking, I'm surprised I'm saying this, but as I've thought about it more, I think the outfield sorts itself out right now with Brian De La Cruz, Jazz, and Jesus Sanchez. In my opinion, there's an 8-war outfield between the three of those guys if they play full years in 24. It's possible. And the total cost of that, around $5 million. Amazing. There's still a role for Avisail Garcia and his $12 million. It could be as a bench guy and as a platoon guy, because there is a need for a platoon guy. They have to consider where Jonathan Davis fits on there, but I would absolutely look to have a insurance policy for Jazz Chisholm Jr. should anything happen at all to Jazz. That defense of Jonathan Davis absolutely plays. So we'll wait to see. Guys are going to wrap it up there, though. I think the Marlins end up sticking with everyone in the outfield, and they look to address other areas in this offseason. They obviously have to address shortstop. We'll talk about that in some detail. Catcher, they have to address in some sort of way. First base, we'll wait to see. But the Marlins have got other priorities. I think they roll it back with the outfield and stick with the same guys, and Avisail Garcia gets one more chance to impress with the Marlins. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen, guys. I'm going to get out of here and get some sleep. It is almost now approaching 11:45. It's almost 11:45 midnight here. So get this bad boy posted. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. See you then.